My name is Keth, and I belong to the Valorian Intelligence Corps. Now, before you start thinking we are some sort of galactic overlords with fancy titles, let me clarify something. We are basically professional watchers. Yes, that is right. We get paid to stare at other species and take notes. Fascinating career choice, I know. Today marks my 43rd rotation observing the human settlement on Taros 9. The planet itself looks like someone took a perfectly decent world and decided to paint it in shades of rust and amber. The humans, in their infinite wisdom, decided this would be an excellent place to grow exotic plants, because apparently making life difficult for themselves is some sort of hobby. From my concealed observation post, nestled between two towering rock formations, I have been documenting the daily activities of roughly 200 human colonists. Most of them are exactly what you would expect. Loud, energetic, constantly chattering about weather patterns and soil composition. They move around their settlement like busy insects, always rushing somewhere important. But then there is Maya Winters. She is different. Quiet does not even begin to cover it. While her fellow humans gather in groups, sharing meals and stories, Maya keeps to herself. She works in the botanical research facility, spending most of her time tending to greenhouse structures filled with earth flora. Her movements are precise, calculated, almost mechanical in their efficiency. What makes Maya truly interesting, however, is her constant companion, a four-legged earth creature the humans call a dog. This particular specimen goes by the name Rusty, and honestly, the name fits. His fur displays various shades of brown and copper, and his ears hang down like wilted leaves. According to my research, this breed is called a golden retriever, though I fail to see anything particularly golden about him. The bond between Maya and this animal is unusual. Where other humans treat their pets as amusing diversions, Maya treats Rusty like family. She speaks to him constantly, her voice barely above a whisper. During breaks, she sits beside him in the settlement garden, her hand resting on his head while she reads from data tablets. Rusty, for his part, never strays more than a few meters from Maya. He follows her to work, waits patiently outside the greenhouse facilities, and greets her with what humans call tail wagging when she emerges. From my observations, Maya Winters appears to be the most unremarkable human in the entire colony. Soft-spoken, predictable, utterly ordinary. How wrong I was about to be. Maya Winters follows a routine so precise you could set a chronometer by her movements. Every morning at exactly 0630 hours, she emerges from her modest living quarters, a small prefabricated structure tucked away in the far corner of the settlement. Rusty trots beside her, his tail moving in that peculiar rhythmic motion humans find so endearing. Their first stop is always the water recycling station. Maya fills two containers, one large, one small. The large one goes to the greenhouse complex. The small one becomes Rusty's morning drink. She watches him lap up the liquid with an expression that can only be described as maternal affection. For a creature that is not even her own species, mind you. The botanical research facility consists of 3 interconnected dome structures, each one maintaining different atmospheric conditions. Maya spends most of her time in Dome 2, where earth vegetables grow alongside native Taros 9 plant species. The humans are attempting to create hybrid crops that can thrive in the planet's soil composition. A noble goal, I suppose, though watching someone stare at tomato plants for 8 hours straight hardly qualifies as thrilling entertainment. What strikes me most about Maya's work ethic is her patience. While other researchers rush between projects, taking notes on data tablets with frantic energy, Maya moves like she has all the time in the universe. She examines each plant with careful attention, her fingers gentle as she checks soil moisture and leaf conditions. Rusty lies nearby, occasionally lifting his head to watch her but mostly content to nap in the filtered sunlight. During lunch breaks, Maya and Rusty retreat to a small bench located behind the research facility. This spot offers privacy from the main settlement activity, which seems to be exactly what Maya prefers. She unwraps simple meals, usually consisting of protein bars and dried fruits, while Rusty receives what appears to be specially prepared food pellets. Here is where their bond becomes most apparent. Maya talks to Rusty constantly during these quiet moments. Her voice carries a warmth that she never displays when interacting with her human colleagues. She tells him about her research findings, describes the growth patterns of various plants, even shares concerns about atmospheric pressure readings affecting crop yields. Rusty listens with the attention of a devoted student. His ears perk up when she mentions certain words, and he occasionally responds with small whining sounds that Maya seems to understand perfectly. She scratches behind his ears when he shows particular interest in her stories, and he leans into her touch like it is the most precious thing in the galaxy. The other colonists treat Maya like living furniture. She exists in their peripheral vision, acknowledged only when absolutely necessary. During weekly settlement meetings, she sits in the back row, rarely speaking unless directly questioned about botanical matters. Her contributions are always practical, never emotional or personal. The moment discussions shift to social topics or entertainment planning, Maya becomes invisible again. I have watched her colleagues walk past her workstation dozens of times without offering greetings. They discuss weekend activities, share jokes, plan group expeditions to survey surrounding areas. Maya is never invited, and more importantly, she never seems to expect invitations. She has created a bubble of solitude around herself, with Rusty as her only companion. This isolation should bother me less than it does. After all, I am supposed to be conducting objective observations, not developing emotional attachments to research subjects. But there is something about Maya's complete contentment with her quiet existence that makes me wonder what lies beneath the surface. Most humans crave social interaction. They form complex relationship networks and seem to require constant validation from their peers. Maya operates like she has transcended such needs, finding fulfillment in plant research and canine companionship. Either she is remarkably evolved, or she is hiding something significant behind that calm exterior. My curiosity grows stronger with each passing day of observation. On day 44 of my surveillance mission, everything changed. And by everything I mean the peaceful, boring routine I had grown accustomed to watching got shattered like cheap glass. The first sign of trouble came at approximately 1,347 hours, when my instruments detected an unregistered vessel entering Taros 9's atmosphere. The ship's design immediately triggered recognition protocols in my database. Skaarn raiders. Well, this was about to become significantly more interesting than plant growth patterns. The Skaarn are what happens when you take the worst qualities of a dozen different predatory species and mash them together into one particularly unpleasant package. Standing roughly 2 meters tall, with gray-green scaled skin and teeth that belong in nightmares, and they have built their entire civilization around the concept of taking things that do not belong to them. Pirates, slavers, and general nuisances to civilized space. Their ship landed with all the grace of a falling asteroid, crushing several of Maya's carefully tended experimental plots in the process. The irony was not lost on me. Months of patient botanical research destroyed in seconds by beings who probably considered vegetables to be a sign of weakness. The settlement's alarm system activated immediately, filling the air with piercing wails that sent colonists scrambling in every direction. Most headed for the central bunker, a reinforced structure designed for exactly this type of emergency. Standard protocol, really. Hide, send distress signals, hope someone with bigger weapons shows up before things get too unpleasant. Maya, however, did not follow standard protocol. While her colleagues ran towards safety, she grabbed Rusty and headed in the opposite direction. Away from the bunker, away from the main settlement, toward the storage facilities on the colony's eastern perimeter. Smart move, actually. The Skaarn would focus their attention on the obvious targets first, giving her time to find better hiding spots. 7 raiders emerged from their ship, weapons drawn and expressions suggesting they were looking forward to whatever came next. Their leader, distinguished by elaborate scarring across his snout and arms decorated with metal spikes, had surveyed the settlement like he was planning a particularly violent shopping trip. The first colonist they encountered was Thomas Burke, a geology specialist who had been conducting soil samples near the landing site. Poor Thomas tried to run. The Skaarn leader found this amusing and decided to demonstrate their superior speed by catching him within 30 meters. What followed was a brief but educational lesson in why humans should not attempt to outrun professional predators. Thomas survived the encounter, though his arm would need significant medical attention. The raiders seemed more interested in establishing dominance than causing immediate fatalities. How considerate of them. Within the hour, the Skaarn had rounded up most of the colonists and herded them into the central plaza. Their demands were straightforward: food supplies, medical equipment, precious metals, and anything else that might prove valuable in interstellar markets. Standard piracy procedure, really. Take everything useful, leave the victims alive but significantly poorer. What made this particular raid noteworthy was the entertainment factor. The Skaarn leader, who his subordinates called Captain Vrak, seemed to enjoy psychological torment almost as much as material profit. He selected random colonists for what he called games. These involved activities like forcing humans to race against Skaarn warriors, compete in strength contests they could not possibly win, or answer riddles in languages they did not understand. A failure to participate resulted in painful but non-lethal consequences. A few electrical shocks here, some bruising there, enough to ensure compliance without reducing the workforce. The Skaarn had clearly done this before. From my observation point, I watched Maya remain hidden in the storage complex with Rusty pressed close to her side. She had found a gap between supply containers that provided both concealment and a clear view of the main settlement. Her expression remained calm, almost analytical, as she observed the raiders' activities. Rusty, however, was becoming increasingly agitated. His ears stood at attention, and low growling sounds rumbled from his throat whenever the Skaarn raised their voices or struck colonists. Maya kept one hand on his back, applying gentle pressure to keep him quiet and still. As the afternoon progressed, Captain Vrak grew bolder with his entertainment choices. What started as simple humiliation escalated to more serious forms of abuse. Colonists were forced to destroy their own research equipment for Skaarn amusement. The settlement's communication array was dismantled piece by piece while its operators watched helplessly. The breaking point came when the raiders discovered the colony's small school facility. Inside, they found educational materials, children's artwork, and a collection of stuffed animals that human offspring apparently required for psychological comfort. Captain Vrak ordered his warriors to destroy everything, piece by piece, while forcing the adult colonists to watch. The violence was escalating, and I found myself wondering how long Maya could remain hidden before the Skaarn expanded their search patterns to include the storage areas. The answer to my question came sooner than expected, and in the worst possible way. Captain Vrak had grown tired of his games with the captive colonists. By late afternoon, he dispatched 3 of his warriors to conduct a thorough search of the settlement's outer buildings. Professional raiders, unfortunately, tend to be thorough in their work. Within 20 minutes, they had located Maya's hiding spot. The first warrior to spot her called out in the harsh Skaarn language, alerting his companions to the discovery. Maya pressed herself deeper into the gap between containers, pulling Rusty closer to her chest. For a moment, I thought she might actually remain undetected, and the shadows in that particular corner were quite deep, and human clothing tends to blend well with industrial equipment. But Rusty had other ideas. The moment the lead warrior stepped closer to investigate, Rusty burst from Maya's arms with a ferocity that surprised everyone present, including me. I had observed this animal for weeks, watching him sleep peacefully in greenhouse facilities and chase flying insects around the settlement gardens. Nothing in his behavior suggested he possessed aggressive capabilities. I was wrong about that too. Rusty launched himself at the nearest Skaarn warrior with the fury of a creature 3 times his size. His teeth found purchase on the raider's leg, just above the ankle joint, where their armor plating offered minimal protection. The warrior howled in pain and surprise, stumbling backward as 60 pounds of enraged canine refused to release its grip. Maya shouted something in the human language, a command most likely trying to call Rusty back to safety. But the damage was already done. The other two warriors converged on the scene, weapons drawn and expressions murderous. The first warrior managed to shake Rusty loose, sending the animal tumbling across the ground between the storage containers. Rusty landed hard but recovered quickly, positioning himself between Maya and the three armed raiders. His hackles were raised, making his fur stand on end, and continuous growling sounds emerged from his throat. What happened next still haunts my memory files. Captain Vrak arrived to investigate the commotion, took one look at the situation and began to laugh. Not the pleasant laughter humans use to express amusement, but the cruel sound predators make when they spot easy prey. "A human pet wishes to play warrior," he said in accented but understandable standard galactic. "How amusing. Let us see how brave it remains." Maya tried to step forward, her hands raised in what I recognized as a human gesture of surrender. She began speaking rapidly, offering cooperation, promising compliance, begging them to leave Rusty alone. Her voice carried desperation I had never heard from her before. Captain Vrak ignored her completely. He drew his sidearm, a weapon designed to deliver focused energy pulses, and adjusted the setting to what Skaarn considered disciplinary level. Non-lethal, but extremely painful. Rusty never moved from his protective position. Even as the weapon powered up with its distinctive whining sound, even as Maya's pleas became more frantic, he stood firm between her and the raiders. His loyalty was absolute, his courage genuine, and his fate inevitable. The energy bolt struck him center mass, sending electrical current through his nervous system. Rusty collapsed instantly, his body convulsing as the weapon's charge disrupted his biological functions. The smell of singed fur filled the air. Maya screamed. It was not the scream of surprise or fear I had heard from other colonists during the raid. This was something primal, a sound that seemed to emerge from the deepest part of her being. She dropped to her knees beside Rusty's still form, her hands hovering over his body as if she could somehow absorb his pain. Rusty was still breathing, but barely. His eyes were open, looking up at Maya with an expression that somehow managed to convey both suffering and continued devotion. She whispered to him in that same gentle voice she used during their lunch conversations, but her words were broken by sobbing. Captain Vrak found this display entertaining. He ordered his warriors to drag Maya away from the injured animal, forcing her to stand while Rusty lay motionless on the ground. The captain then explained, in unnecessary detail, how they would add the human pet to their ship's menu if Maya caused any further trouble. That was the moment everything changed. I watched Maya's face transform from grief-stricken desperation to something else entirely. Her tears stopped. Her sobbing ceased. Her expression became calm, almost serene, but her eyes developed a quality that made my scales crawl. The Skaarn raiders were too busy congratulating themselves on their clever intimidation tactics to notice the shift. They failed to observe how Maya's posture straightened, how her breathing became controlled and measured, how her gaze moved systematically across each of their faces as if she were memorizing details for future reference. They had broken something in Maya Winters, something that should have stayed intact. And they had absolutely no idea what they had just unleashed. What I witnessed over the following hours fundamentally changed my understanding of human psychology. And frankly, it terrified me more than any Skaarn raider ever could. The pirates dragged Maya back to the central plaza with the other captives, leaving Rusty where he had fallen. She offered no resistance, spoke no words of protest, and displayed no further emotional outbursts. To Captain Vrak and his warriors, she appeared to be just another broken colonist, subdued by their demonstration of power. They could not have been more wrong. While the Skaarn continued their looting operations, I focused my observation equipment on Maya's behavior. What I documented contradicted everything I thought I knew about her personality. The quiet, gentle researcher who spent her days nurturing plants had vanished completely, replaced by something calculating and methodical. Maya sat with the other prisoners, but she was not simply waiting for rescue or hoping for mercy. Her eyes moved constantly, cataloging details with mechanical precision. She studied each raider's equipment, noted their movement patterns, observed their weapon handling procedures, and mapped the settlement's new security arrangements. When the guards were not watching, she tested her restraints. Not frantically like other captives, but with careful, controlled movements designed to gather information about their construction and weak points. She flexed her wrists, rotated her shoulders, and shifted her weight in ways that appeared casual but were clearly diagnostic. Most disturbing was her facial expression, or rather, the complete absence of expression. The grief that had consumed her after Rusty's injury had been replaced by an emptiness that seemed to absorb light. She looked like someone who had stepped outside the normal boundaries of human emotion and found a place where feelings could not interfere with necessary actions. During the evening meal distribution, Maya engaged in brief conversations with fellow prisoners, but I enhanced my audio sensors to monitor these exchanges. On the surface, they appeared to be typical comfort discussions. Reassurances about rescue operations, speculation about how long the raiders planned to stay, expressions of hope for better treatment. But Maya's questions were different. She asked about the settlement's maintenance schedules, which systems required daily attention, where emergency supplies were stored, the locations of backup power sources, information that would be completely irrelevant to someone simply hoping to survive captivity. One colonist mentioned that the communications array backup was hidden in the old survey station. Another noted that the water treatment facility had secondary access tunnels for repair work. A third commented that the medical supplies were distributed across multiple storage points to prevent total loss during emergencies. Maya absorbed every detail with the focus of someone building a comprehensive intelligence file. As night fell, the Skaarn established a watch rotation that demonstrated their professional experience with planetary raids. 3 guards remained active at all times, positioned to provide overlapping coverage of the prisoner area and approaches to their ship. Smart tactics, really. Most rescue operations would struggle against such arrangements. But Maya was not planning a rescue operation. Around midnight, she began displaying behaviors that triggered my xenopsychology training protocols. Humans experiencing severe psychological trauma often develop what specialists call dissociative states, where conscious thought becomes separated from emotional processing. Maya's actions suggested something far more complex and considerably more dangerous. She started making small movements that appeared to be nervous fidgeting but followed patterns too precise to be unconscious. Her fingers traced geometric shapes against her leg restraints, her breathing synchronized with mathematical progressions. Her head tilted at specific angles while she studied the guard positions. I realized she was accessing memory systems that had been dormant since her arrival on Taros 9. Background files indicated Maya Winters had listed her previous occupation as agricultural specialist with civilian certification levels, but the behaviors I was documenting suggested training that extended far beyond plant biology. The way she evaluated sight lines spoke of weapons instruction. Her assessment of guard patterns indicated tactical education. The systematic approach to gathering intelligence pointed to military background that had been deliberately concealed or forgotten. When the third watch rotation began, Maya made her move. She did not attempt escape. Instead, she volunteered for latrine duty, a task that required temporary removal from the main prisoner group under single guard supervision. The Skaarn warrior assigned to escort duty treated this as routine prisoner management, not recognizing the opportunity Maya had just created. The facilities were located near the storage complex where Rusty still lay unconscious. Maya's guard remained at regulation distance, allowing her privacy while maintaining visual contact. Standard procedure for managing civilian captives who posed no tactical threat. During those precious minutes of relative freedom, Maya accessed emergency supply caches hidden throughout the settlement. Her knowledge of their locations was far too precise for someone who had simply worked in the botanical facility. She retrieved items that individually appeared innocent but collectively formed the foundation of something significantly more threatening. A maintenance multi-tool here. Chemical supplies from the research laboratory there. Electronic components from damaged communication equipment. Materials that could be recombined into devices the original manufacturers never intended. When she returned to the prisoner group, Maya appeared exactly as she had before. Subdued, compliant, defeated. But I had watched her transform ordinary colonist resources into potential weapons using knowledge that definitely did not come from agricultural training programs. The most unsettling realization was that Maya's transformation had been triggered by witnessing harm to her animal companion. The emotional bond I had observed between her and Rusty was not simply affection. It was the primary anchor keeping her previous identity stable. When that anchor was severed, something else had surfaced to fill the void. It's something that understood violence in ways that contradicted everything the Skaarn thought they knew about human capabilities. As the night progressed, I found myself questioning my original assessment of human psychology. The Galactic Council's files described them as primarily emotional beings, driven by feelings rather than logic, prone to panic under pressure. Maya's behavior suggested those files were dangerously incomplete. She was planning something that would require patience, precision, and a complete disregard for conventional moral limitations. The quiet researcher who had spent weeks carefully nurturing plant life was systematically preparing to end it in ways the universe had not yet witnessed. And the Skaarn raiders continued their celebration, completely unaware that their greatest threat was sitting quietly among their captives, counting their weapons and memorizing their faces. The first elimination occurred at dawn, and I almost missed it entirely. Warrior Grath had drawn early perimeter duty, patrolling the settlement's outer buildings while his companions enjoyed their rest cycles. Standard security protocol required these patrols to check predetermined locations every 30 minutes, thus maintaining communication with the central guard post throughout their rounds. Grath's final transmission came at 0547 hours, Eastern Sector clear, proceeding to storage complex inspection. He never made his next scheduled report. When the relief patrol found him 20 minutes later, Grath was slumped against a supply container, apparently unconscious. Initial examination suggested some form of respiratory distress, possibly caused by exposure to industrial chemicals. The settlement did house various research compounds, after all, and Skaarn physiology could react poorly to certain atmospheric contaminants. It was only when they attempted to wake him that they discovered Grath was not unconscious. He was dead. Maya had crafted the perfect murder weapon using materials from her botanical research facility. A combination of native Terros 9 plant alkaloids and earth-based compounds that, when mixed properly, created an aerosol toxin specifically lethal to Skaarn respiratory systems. The delivery method was elegant in its simplicity. A small dispersal device hidden among routine maintenance equipment, triggered by proximity sensors when the target approached. What made this elimination particularly brilliant was its apparent accidental nature. To the surviving raiders, Grath's death looked like an unfortunate encounter with hazardous research materials, an occupational hazard of raiding scientific installations. Captain Vrak ordered increased caution around laboratory areas but saw no reason to suspect deliberate sabotage. After all, the human prisoners remained under constant supervision, and none had demonstrated the knowledge or capability to create sophisticated chemical weapons. They were wrong on both counts. Maya's second strike came during the afternoon supply loading operations. The Skaarn had organized work details to transfer valuable equipment from the settlement to their ship. Prisoner labor under armed supervision, standard raiding efficiency. Warrior Keth was supervising the dismantling of communication equipment when he noticed unusual behavior from one of the smaller electronic components. It was emitting a high-pitched whining sound and generating heat signatures that suggested internal malfunction. He leaned closer to investigate. The improvised explosive device Maya had constructed from power cells and frequency modulators detonated with enough force to remove Kess's head from his shoulders. The blast also destroyed most of the communication gear, which the surviving raiders assumed was the device's accidental target. Another unfortunate accident. These human research facilities were clearly more dangerous than anticipated. But Captain Vrak was beginning to notice patterns that troubled him. 2 dead warriors in less than 12 hours. Both deaths occurring in locations recently visited by prisoner work details. both incidents involving equipment or materials that should have been harmless. He ordered his remaining warriors to increase security protocols and reduce prisoner movement. Only essential work details would be permitted, and all would be conducted under multiple guard supervision. Maya adapted her tactics accordingly. The third elimination required more direct approach, which showcased aspects of her training that made my skin crawl. Warrior Thex was conducting weapons maintenance in the raiders' temporary command post when Maya requested permission to retrieve medical supplies for an injured colonist. The request seemed reasonable. Several prisoners had sustained injuries during the initial raid, and basic humanitarian concerns suggested allowing treatment. Thex accompanied Maya to the medical storage facility, maintaining regulation distance while she gathered bandages and antiseptic compounds. What happened next occurred so quickly that my recording equipment barely captured the sequence. Maya's movements shifted from careful medical gathering to lethal combat application in less than 2 seconds. Her hands found pressure points on Thex's neck with surgical precision, disrupting blood flow to his brain while simultaneously preventing vocal cord function. Thex collapsed without making a sound. Maya then used medical restraints to secure his unconscious form before applying a combination of anesthetic compounds that would ensure he never regained consciousness. The entire process took under 4 minutes and left no obvious signs of violence. When Thex failed to return from escort duty, the other raiders assumed he had abandoned his post to pursue personal looting opportunities. Such behavior was not uncommon among Skaarn warriors, and Captain Vrak's discipline methods would address the problem when Thex eventually returned. Except Thex would never return. Maya had hidden his body in a location where it would not be discovered until long after the raiders departed. By evening, Captain Vrak was dealing with a significant personnel shortage. Half his original force was either dead or missing, and the remaining warriors were beginning to display symptoms of paranoia. They jumped at unexpected sounds, demanded constant communication with their partners, and insisted on conducting all activities in pairs. Maya responded by escalating her psychological warfare campaign. She began leaving subtle signs of her activities where the raiders would eventually discover them. A small pile of chemical residue near Grath's death site. Electronic components arranged in patterns that suggested deliberate construction. Medical supplies missing from the exact cabinet where Thex had been eliminated. The evidence was circumstantial but unmistakable. Someone was systematically targeting Skaarn warriors using knowledge and resources that should not have been available to civilian prisoners. Captain Vrak ordered a complete search of all prisoners and their immediate areas. They found nothing. Maya had carefully distributed her remaining materials across multiple concealment points that would never be discovered by routine inspection procedures. But the damage to Skaarn morale was already complete. The hunters were becoming the hunted, and they knew it. The fourth elimination occurred during the evening meal preparation. Maya had volunteered for food service duty, an assignment that required access to the settlement's main kitchen facilities. Warrior Zork was supervising this operation when he began experiencing digestive distress. The symptoms started mildly. Stomach cramping, nausea, general discomfort. Skaarn physiology was robust enough to handle most dietary irregularities, so Zork initially attributed his condition to consuming unfamiliar human food supplies. Within an hour, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Severe abdominal pain, respiratory difficulties, and neurological symptoms that suggested systemic poisoning. By the time his companions realized this was not simple food intolerance, Zork was beyond medical assistance. Maya had introduced a time-delayed toxin into the warrior's meal, using her knowledge of both Skaarn biology and plant biochemistry to create a compound that would remain undetectable until it was too late to counteract its effects. Captain Vrak was now down to 2 subordinates, facing an enemy who could strike anywhere, at any time, using methods that defied his understanding of human capabilities. His remaining warriors refused to eat settlement food, demanded constant partner supervision, and insisted on wearing full environmental protection gear at all times. The psychological impact was devastating. These were professional raiders who had terrorized dozens of planetary settlements without encountering significant resistance. Now they were being systematically eliminated by a single human female who had access to nothing more than basic research materials and maintenance supplies. As night fell, Captain Vrak made a decision that revealed the depth of his desperation. He would execute one prisoner every hour until the unknown saboteur revealed themselves. Surely whoever was responsible would not allow innocent civilians to die for their actions. He was about to learn another lesson about human psychology that the Galactic Council's files had failed to mention. Maya Winters was no longer operating within normal moral frameworks. The gentle researcher who had once worried about plant growth rates had been replaced by something that calculated acceptable losses with the same precision she had once applied to soil chemistry. And Captain Vrak had just provided her with the perfect opportunity to demonstrate exactly how far beyond normal she had traveled. Captain Vrak's ultimatum lasted exactly 17 minutes. He had barely finished announcing his intention to execute prisoners when the settlement's main power grid suffered what appeared to be a catastrophic failure. Emergency lighting activated automatically, but the reduced illumination created perfect conditions for someone who understood how to move unseen through familiar territory. Maya struck during the confusion that followed the power outage. Her first target was Warrior Bex, one of Captain Vrak's 2 remaining subordinates. He was attempting to restore lighting to the central plaza when Maya emerged from shadows that should not have been able to conceal a human form. Her approach was completely silent, her movements fluid like liquid darkness, and her timing absolutely perfect. Bex never saw her coming. One moment he was examining electrical connections. The next he was falling unconscious as Maya applied pressure to specific nerve clusters that induced immediate paralysis. She secured him using improvised restraints, then dragged his helpless form into the maintenance tunnels beneath the settlement. Captain Vrak realized his tactical situation had become untenable when Bex failed to respond to communication attempts. He was now down to a single subordinate, facing an unknown enemy who possessed capabilities that exceeded his understanding of human limitations. His final warrior suggested immediate evacuation. Load whatever supplies they had already gathered, abandon the remaining prisoners, and depart before suffering additional casualties. A logical recommendation that demonstrated appropriate risk assessment. Captain Vrak refused to consider retreat. His reputation among Skaarn raiders depended on completing successful operations, not fleeing from single human females armed with maintenance supplies. Besides, how dangerous could one colonist actually be? He was about to receive a comprehensive education on that particular subject. Maya's next appearance was calculated for maximum psychological impact. She emerged from the botanical research facility carrying what appeared to be an improvised flamethrower constructed from greenhouse equipment and chemical supplies. The device was crude but functional, capable of projecting streams of burning liquid across significant distances. More importantly, it was aimed directly at Captain Vrak. "You hurt my dog," Maya said, her voice carrying the same gentle tone she had used during their lunch conversations. But the words carried weight that made the surrounding air feel heavy with menace. Captain Vrak laughed, though the sound carried less confidence than he intended. "Your pathetic pet attacked my warrior. I provided appropriate discipline." Maya's expression did not change. "Appropriate discipline," she repeated, as if testing the phrase for accuracy. "Interesting perspective. Let me demonstrate what I consider appropriate discipline for someone who harms innocent creatures." She triggered the flamethrower. Captain Vrak dove aside as burning chemical spray splashed across the ground where he had been standing. The mixture continued burning for several minutes, generating enough heat to melt nearby metal components. Had he remained in position, the result would have been immediate and extremely painful death. Maya began advancing steadily, maintaining constant pressure with precisely controlled flame bursts that herded Captain Vrak toward the settlement's outer perimeter. Her movements were methodical, professional, completely lacking the emotional volatility he expected from grieving humans. Warrior Sec attempted to provide covering fire, but Maya had anticipated this response. She had prepared the battlefield extensively, placing small explosive charges at strategic locations around the plaza. When Sek moved to flank her position, his footsteps triggered proximity sensors that detonated devices she had constructed from power cells and timing circuits. The explosions were not intended to kill Sek outright. Instead, they created sufficient confusion and debris to separate him from his captain while inflicting injuries that would prevent effective pursuit. Captain Vrak found himself alone, armed with standard Skaarn weaponry, facing a human who had somehow transformed the entire settlement into a death trap specifically designed to counter his species' combat advantages. He tried negotiation. Perhaps we can reach an understanding. Your pet's injury was regrettable. I am prepared to offer compensation. Maya's response was to increase the flamethrower's output range, forcing him to retreat further from the central settlement. Compensation, she said, her tone suggesting she found the concept fascinating from an academic perspective. What form of compensation would be appropriate for torturing an innocent animal in front of someone who loved him? Captain Vrak realized that standard diplomatic approaches were not going to work with this particular human. He switched to threats instead. My ship contains orbital bombardment capabilities. Arm me, and this entire colony will be reduced to radioactive debris. Maya paused her advance for the first time since the confrontation began. For a moment, Captain Vrak thought he had found leverage that would allow him to regain control of the situation. Then Maya smiled. It was the most terrifying expression I had ever witnessed on any species' face. Your ship, she said, experienced an unfortunate accident approximately 1 hour ago, something involving the fuel storage system and a small incendiary device I placed during yesterday's supply loading operations. The explosion was quite spectacular. I made sure to time it for maximum dramatic effect. Captain Vrak spun around to look toward his landing site. Where his ship had been parked, only a crater remained, still glowing with residual heat from whatever Maya had done to his vessel's power core. She had cut off his escape route before beginning the final confrontation. This had not been a spontaneous revenge attack. This was a carefully planned execution, designed to ensure he had no options except to face the consequences of his actions. Captain Vrak's weapon hand began shaking as the full scope of his situation became clear. He was stranded on a hostile planet, facing an enemy who had systematically eliminated his entire crew, destroyed his transportation, and demonstrated capabilities that suggested extensive military training disguised as civilian research work. "What are you?" he whispered. Maya considered the question with genuine thoughtfulness. "I was a botanist," she said finally. Someone who spent her days nurturing life and studying growth patterns, someone who believed in gentle solutions and peaceful coexistence. She raised the flamethrower again, and Captain Vrak could see his reflection in her eyes. What he saw there made him understand that pleading would be pointless. "But you hurt my dog," Maya continued, her voice carrying finality that sounded like closing doors. "And that person you might have negotiated with died the moment Rusty hit the ground." Captain Vrak made one final attempt to escape, running toward the settlement's outer buildings with desperate speed that surprised me. Skaarn physiology provided significant advantages in terms of muscle power and endurance. It was not enough. Maya had prepared for this possibility too. Hidden throughout the escape routes were additional traps, obstacles and diversions that channeled fleeing targets toward predetermined locations. Within minutes, Captain Vrak found himself cornered against the settlement's perimeter wall, with nowhere left to run. Maya approached him slowly, savoring each step like she was conducting a final inspection of experimental results. When she spoke again, her words carried the satisfaction of someone whose careful work had produced exactly the desired outcome. "This is for Rusty," she said. What happened next confirmed my worst fears about human psychology and protective instincts. The gentle researcher who had spent weeks caring for plants delivered justice with an efficiency that would have impressed professional executioners across the galaxy. Captain Vrak's screams echoed across the settlement until Maya decided she had heard enough. After the silence returned, Maya walked calmly back to the storage complex where Rusty lay dying. She knelt beside him with the same gentle precision she had once used to tend her botanical specimens, Her hands, still carrying traces of Captain Vrack's blood, moved with infinite care as she lifted Rusty's head onto her lap. The transformation from terrifying predator to devoted companion happened so quickly that I questioned my own sensor readings. "I am sorry I took so long," she whispered, her voice returning to that familiar warmth I had observed during their lunch conversations. "I had some things to take care of first." Rusty's tail managed one final, weak movement. His eyes focused on Maya's face with the same absolute devotion he had shown throughout their time together. Whatever pain the Skaarn weapon had caused him seemed to fade as she stroked his fur and spoke to him about the plants they would tend together in whatever place loyal companions go when their duties are finally complete. I watched her hold him until his breathing stopped, her tears falling silently onto his copper-colored coat. In that moment, she was no longer the efficient killer who had systematically eliminated an entire raider crew. She was simply someone saying goodbye to her best friend. When the rescue ships arrived 3 days later, Maya Winters had returned to her role as quiet botanical researcher. She provided factual reports about the Skaarn raid, described the pirates' demands and tactics, and expressed appropriate grief for the colonists who had been injured during the attack. She never mentioned her own activities during the crisis. When questioned about the raiders' fate, she suggested they had probably fallen victim to the settlement's hazardous research materials. Unfortunate accidents, really. These scientific installations could be quite dangerous for unprepared visitors. The rescue teams found evidence supporting her assessment: chemical spills, equipment malfunctions, environmental hazards that explained everything without requiring deeper investigation. Maya returned to her greenhouse duties, cultivating new plant varieties with the same patience and precision she had always displayed. To casual observers, nothing had changed. She remained quiet, methodical, utterly ordinary. But I knew better. I had witnessed the transformation that lurked beneath her peaceful exterior, waiting for the right circumstances to emerge again. My final report to Valorian Command contained recommendations that contradicted decades of established xenopsychological doctrine. The humans were not simply emotional creatures driven by feelings rather than logic. They were apex predators disguised as peaceful researchers, capable of tactical thinking that surpassed military specialists when properly motivated. More importantly, their protective instincts toward bonded companions created psychological triggers that unlocked capabilities the Galactic Council had never suspected. Harm something a human truly loves, and you do not face a grieving victim. You face something that will systematically hunt you across the galaxy until justice is delivered. My supervisors filed my report under subjective observations requiring further study and assigned me to monitor a Polarian mining operation instead. They should have listened. Throughout the galaxy, there are humans living quiet lives, tending gardens, researching obscure academic subjects, working in laboratories and libraries and research stations. They appear harmless, unremarkable, completely ordinary. Do not let their peaceful facades deceive you. Do not assume their gentle natures make them weak. And above all, never, ever hurt their dogs. Some lessons are only learned once.